Morant with a running start. Oh, it dunks! Oh, my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! He hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies unexpectedly announced that Zach Edey had surgery, and now reportedly he could miss the start of next season. So on today's episode, we're going to talk about that bad news. And also Keith Smith is here from Spotrac to talk about the Grizzlies offseason, including the upcoming contracts of Jaren Jackson Jr., Morant and Santi Aldama. So before we get into all of that, just a reminder, if you want to support this program, you get access to my listener Slack channel and exclusive bonus content. You can do that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. So if you're a regular listener or a regular watcher and want to consider joining the community of support, do it over at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right. First and foremost, let's welcome Keith Smith to the show. Keith, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. I wanted to get you on to talk about maybe the minutia of contract details and to get an outside view on what the Grizzlies should do this offseason. But of course, got preempted a little bit with this Zach Edey injury news. So let's go over that. What we know right now is that Zach Edey re-sprained his ankle in a workout, and he's undergone surgery to stabilize that ankle. From the team, they said imaging revealed excessive ligamentous laxity. Keith, what do you know about ligamentous laxity?
Nothing. Much to my parents' disappointment, I do this instead of becoming a doctor, but it
That's
doesn't
right.
sound good.
Everything sounds bad.
Right.
It's honestly, if someone asked me, Keith, do you wish you had more ligamentous laxity? I'd think about it. I'd say, actually, yes. That feels like maybe I'd be a little, yeah. But apparently it's bad. So he's had the surgery to address this issue. I guess the bad luck for the Grizzlies and our fan base, we feel sort of cursed with all these terrible injury updates. You could, on the one hand, be like, oh yeah, big man, foot problems. You kind of knew that going in. But then, like, Zach Edey was a horse in college, as far as I knew. He never got hurt. So this just seems like bad luck. Of course, he's going to miss the whole summer, going to miss Summer League and all that. Seems like a big setback for Zach personally. If he does miss the start of the season, I think there are some roster concerns with the Grizzlies, maybe, because, of course, now you have Santi Aldama, another big who's a restricted free agent. You have Brandon Clark, who ended last season injured. Now, the reports then, and I don't think we've gotten a report since it actually happened. This is like late March. He had a PCL sprain, and they said he's supposed to be available for the beginning of the year. But now I'll ask you, Keith, what do you think this means, if anything, for the Grizzlies in the way they approach the offseason?
Yeah, it's certainly not good. And we're hearing that may miss the start of the season. And I always think there's two different, right? I hear that and I instantly, I don't know why, maybe I'm just a pessimist. I instantly go to could be out till Christmas. Like that's just kind of where my mind goes. If it's missed the start of the season and he's going to miss a handful of games in the first couple weeks of October, all right, that's, you figure it out, you get by with that. But if we're talking Christmas, that's like starting to get around a third of the season or so. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you have to approach things a little bit differently because none of the guys on the roster, or guys we think will be on the roster at least, are like an adequate replacement for what he gives them. So then I start thinking about, all right, well, do you go the very easy route and like, hey, Marvin Bagley, like you were here at the end of the year, you have a sense of what we're about, do you want to come back for, reasonable deal? And we'll kind of cobble together the minutes at the 5 that Edey would have given us. Or do you go to like another option, out there in free agency and look at, another veteran big man and say, hey, we're going to go down that route instead because that's there. I guess, or the other piece is if it becomes something where like Aldama is moving on, and I know we're going to get into him later, then maybe you look at, all right, let's add a more permanent replacement. And why I put that very much in quotations is we're not trying to replace Zach Edey long term. He's still the starting center, but get somebody in there who can replace him while he's out, then be a really good third big for us in the rotation on a night to night basis. If we're kind of having this other flux with our big man group.
Yeah. So right now, the Grizzlies, the big men under contract for next year, you got Jaren Jackson Jr., you got Brandon Clark, who's been an injury concern, and again, into the season hurt. Then you have Jay Huff, and then there's Zach Edey. And it's like, you're not really going to turn this over to Jay Huff. And if, like you said, missed the beginning of the year, Grizzlies fans were scarred from this because we've seen Gigi Jackson, Marcus Smart, Vince Williams Jr. There's been other years where it's Desmond Bain. It's always the beginning of the year. And then it's like, oh, Gigi Jackson's not coming back to January. And so it feels like it always stretches on. And it's a blow because I do feel like most Grizzlies fans had kind of settled into Edey being a building block, like a bright spot, like all right, we have our big 3, and then there's Edey. We can depend on him and Jalen Wells. I'm not in that camp as much, where I'm still like, for me, he's still very unproven, and I hope it works out. But now, like you said, does this change the course of the offseason where they decide we need another more permanent, as you said, like a guy who might start some or be in your top 6 or 7 of your rotation? And it's all clouded by all the different balls I feel like the Grizzlies have in the air with, are they going to be a cap space team? Are they going to give all that money to Jaren Jackson Jr. to try to renegotiate and extend? So I don't know. It really changes things up for this offseason. And again, I feel sad for Edey, even just missing training camp. I mean, missing summer league's one thing. You get good reps there. We've seen a lot of guys make a lot of improvements through summer league, but just missing a training camp and not being able to, I don't know, you got a new coach, frankly, like Isolo is installing his stuff. Maybe it's going to be different. And so not having your presumed starting center, it's not ideal. Well, now let's turn it to this Jaren Jackson Jr. talk, which is all everyone has talked about. And I don't know, again, we've basically, I think, all agreed to certain facts here as NBA fans and Grizzlies fans. I think we all know the Grizzlies have about $7 million worth of cap space if they renounce all their guys. And that also goes back to like the Marvin Bagley thing. Like, well, you're not going to, we were going to get rid of his cap hold. I mean, you could bring him back. I mean, obviously he's not expected to make as much as he was making, but there's some changes there. What is your thought on the Jaren situation as it stands, and like how far away are they from something he might expect if they just are able to give him $7 million to bump up this final year of his contract and then renegotiate off of that number?
Yeah, I think they were very clearly hopeful that Defensive Player of the Year or an All-NBA spot were going to be in the cards for Jaren Jackson Jr. because that just would have made things much easier as far as, all right, then, and people instantly went to, but he wouldn't have been worth a max deal. He's not worth the 35% of the cap max, but you don't have to go all the way to 35%. You would have had all kinds of play in there between the, 23 million or so he's making now and in the, 50 million that would have been. You probably could have settled that like 35 million a year or something. Now, in order to get there, the only realistic path today, and by today I mean this summer, is you like you said, you announce everybody but Aldama and you keep his restricted rights. That gives you about 7 million in cap space. Then you tack that on to the money he makes this year. So now he's up over 30 million. Then what you're allowed to do is you can extend him for 140% of that number. So basically a 40% bump. That's about 42-ish million or so. That's what he would jump up to. Now we're in a spot where, okay, salary starting off of 42 million or something, even slightly less than that. That's in the same range of probably where we would have landed had he, achieved All NBA. But here's the issue. That now takes you down to you have the $8 million room except well, almost $9 million room exception. That's what you'd have left to resign. So it Jackson Jr. renegotiated. We can sign somebody for up to 8 million on the room exception and almost 9 million. And then we have Aldama. And that's okay. Now your other path would be, hey, Jackson, can you wait, a year? We're going to take care of you in free agency next year. Yeah, you're not going to get the 7 million bump this year, but we can tack that 7 million spread out 2 million a year over the next 4-year deal we give you or whatever it is, and we'll take care of you then. And now we have the $15 million non-taxpayer, Emily, and we can retain free agent rights on all of our guys and figure out deals with not only Aldama, but Bagley or Kennard or whoever it may be that we want to look at retaining. And it's really kind of a balancer between Jackson's faith and trust in the organization, their faith and trust in him, and quite frankly, this summer, your only real player with cap space is the Brooklyn Nets, who are completely rebuilding, and you're not too worried about them. But next summer, we may have 10, 12 teams with cap space, some of them pretty good teams. Some of those teams may be, you know what we are? We're Jaren Jackson Jr. away from being a whole different level of team. And that's where it can get really, really messy if you don't take care of it now. So those I imagine are quite frankly, I'm always a grown up with this stuff. I don't scream and yell about tampering and cry about all that. So I always say, those are the conversations that are already happening and have been happening, where it's between Jackson, his reps, and the Grizzlies on, all right, where do we feel like we have to be right now in the moment to make this work?
Yeah. And we see in the NBA nowadays, virtually no players of Jaren's quality hit free agency anymore. Everyone takes care of their own guys. The way the league runs now, basically, you don't let anyone get to free agency. I've been one with the scenario the Grizzlies were in. I was like, all right, since he missed all NBA, it seems easier to me. I mean, an amateur, a podcaster, it seems easier to me to build a competitive squad for this upcoming season and next season's. If you're like, you know what, let's get a little bit uncomfortable and let Jaren go into free agency. We can still offer him more than anybody else. If Jaren wants to be here, this is great. But of course that feels risky. And it seems like in retrospect, I didn't understand a lot of it at the time. Like if you go back and listen to my episodes while things were happening over the past year, I was like, why do they do this? Why do they do it? And then at the end, when they traded Marcus Smart, you're like, oh, were they the whole time? Just they're trying to clear cap space to give themselves another avenue to keep Jaren. And I think it's sort of ironic. Like if you hadn't done all that stuff, I think there's an argument to be made. He would have made all NBA because maybe you would have finished the season a little bit stronger. Sure. And like if you had Marcus Smart still around and Jake LaRavia still around, and if you added to your team last summer, like they had the avenues to go into the first apron or get a luxury tax, they could have used their MLE on a free agent. They kept not doing it. And in retrospect, you're like, oh, it's because they wanted this flexibility to deal with Jaren. Now, I've taken some issue with the term flexibility, and I feel like I see a lot of people way smarter than me describe the Marcus Smart trade, which ended up being sending away the 18th pick in this year's draft, as being a good move for flexibility. And I'm like, well, okay, I understand what you mean, that it gives us an avenue possibly to renegotiate and extend Jaren. But what do they mean, Keith, when they say flexibility? Is there something beyond that? Because to me, having Marcus Smart's salary and the 18th pick and also Marcus Smart, that seems like that gives you some flexibility too. But now that's gone. So what could I be missing when people compliment the Marcus Smart deal, or when Zach Kleiman keeps talking about how like, oh yeah, we did that for flexibility?
Yeah. So let me start this out by couching. I covered the Celtics for a number of years. I grew up as a Celtics fan. I'm a big Marcus Smart fan. I always have been. I want nothing but the best for him. That said, you traded a pick for him. You traded a pick to get rid of him. That's just not good business, right?
I'd like to stop you there and say we traded 2 picks for him, but keep going.
Correct. Yes, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Good point. So you end up landing in a spot where it's like, you don't want to be on the side of picks to get a guy, picks to dump a guy. Like that's never really good. So that part I'm 100% with you. And for me, flexibility is it can be a misused term, especially when the flexibility seems to be for one specific thing that you can do, which is giving Jackson Jr. the bump in the renegotiation and then extending him at a bigger number moving forward. Just to be clear, too, and I should have mentioned this when we were talking about Jackson, they just extend him on a regular veteran extension and bring him up to nearly 33 million in first year salary. And if that's in the range of enough, then all right, maybe we go. But if it needs to be 35 million plus, pushing 40, yeah, your re-extension path is the way. But for me, that's where, yeah, I would also clap back a little bit against this flexibility. Now, if nothing happens with Jackson, yeah, you did create a ton of clearance under the tax, under the aprons. You can do what you need to do. You could use the full non-taxpayer MLE, which should have real spending power this summer because a combination of, I already said, the Nets are the only team with meaningful cap space. Then there are no superstar free agents available, but there are a lot of guys who are right in that MLE range, and not a lot of teams are going to be able to offer even the full MLE. So that would have good spending power. But to that point is, what are we chasing? Are we chasing then upgrades for Smart? Like when we could have just had him? Like where are we going? And that's where it gets a little more sideways for me, I guess, is yeah, if you're saying that we're gonna use that flexibility, take the Jackson part out of it for the moment. We're gonna re-sign Aldama to a deal we feel is fair. We're going to use the full non-taxpayer. All right, I'm not going to balk too much against that. I need to see how that plays out and what you do. But yeah, I think it's a little overstated because it's not like if you're talking, hey, we have all this flexibility now because now we have $35 million in cap space that we can use. Well, that's a whole different ball game than just, yeah, we freed up a few different paths for ourselves.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the feedback things I get from listeners and fans, and they ask like, well, can the Grizzlies be involved in like trying to chase down a Kevin Durant, or how do we get in the Giannis sweepstakes? And I keep being like, well, it would have been a lot easier if we had the Marcus Smart salary around and we had that 18th pick around. Now it's like, who do you want to get rid of? You want to get rid of Desmond Bane or Ja Morant? And then who else? It seems the dreaming of bringing in the quote unquote like big fish, it seems way harder now. Not that they were ever going to do that, but yes, they are really far away from the luxury tax. I've started working out, okay, we could bring in these sort of mismatched salary trades where we send out a guy, we help out a team who's trying to get off a little bit more money, but I'm not as excited about it. At least I'm not excited about the things when you think about non-Jaren reasons for the trade. Looking at Jaren's contract, I actually have a question. Is it a legal thing for them to do? So to renegotiate and extend, you have to offer him at least 3 years added on. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah. So you would need to tag on. Well, you can, in a renegotiation and extension, you can tag on up to 3 more years.
Okay.
I believe it is the way that's actually phrased.
Because I was wondering if they could do something, because we keep comparing the numbers where it's like, all right, if you went up to 30 for this upcoming season and then extended off that over the next 4 or 5 years, it's still not what he would have gotten if he goes into free agency, signs a full 30% max, but it's not like insulting. It's like, oh, I can't remember it's like 220 versus 250 or something over the next like 4 seasons combined. I was wondering if, without creating any more cap space, if they could do something where they bump him up to 30, for this upcoming season, then you extend maybe like 2 years and a player option for the 3rd year. If that would be something where Jaren could then, if he wanted to, get back on the market with 10 years of experience, and it would be maybe an in-between mode. Like Jaren doesn't want to sign for a full 5-year or 4-year extension. And they'll say, all right, we'll get you close. Like, I think that would be over the next 3 seasons. It would be like 120 versus 130 million. And that to me seems like, all right, Jaren, you can lock down this much money and then you give yourself some optionality. I don't know if that was a path maybe that would be good for both sides.
Yeah, and we have seen those shorter term extensions become a thing. Donovan Mitchell did one. Luka Doncic is expected to take a similar path with the Lakers. And the reason for them is when you're traded from your original team, unless you're traded on your while still on your rookie scale contract, you're no longer super max eligible. And in their cases, how they're kind of working around that is signing extensions that will take them right up until they become supermax eligible, which is the 35% of the cap maximum. Then they'll sign that year. So what you're going to see with like Mitchell is he signed, he'll play out the next couple of years, then decline an option in that last year, assuming everything goes as expected, and then he will sign for the 10 years of service max, the 35% of the cap. That's how you kind of get around that restriction. You just can't do it immediately. So, where probably as recently as a couple years ago, I would have balked a little bit at that path you laid out, saying, like, man,
Yeah.
it's just because the reality is most guys are like, wait, I can get this much money right now for this minute. Just, yeah, do it. Like
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
we'll go. We are seeing it be a little bit more where guys are going. Now, I will say there's a couple things in favor of Jackson giving the Grizzlies some flexibility here is one is he did it on his current contract, which is part of the reason we're in this whole mess anyway, is because he signed that declining extension when he signed it because it went down year over year, which made it off his current salary. And when I say current, I mean like next year's
Yes.
salary, the 25, 27. I'm already living in that year as far as rosters and cap stuff go. So that makes that almost unextendable. The number's just so low. So then what that turns into for Jackson is you could kind of say, all right, well, he's already worked with the team once to be creative on how can we bridge the gap. Now, at that point, he was coming off a lot of injuries in the early part of his career, and there was a lot of uncertainty. Now, I think there's a lot more certainty as to what he is as a player, health wise, and all that. But still, there's been a level there. I also don't get the sense from anybody I've talked to that he really has any desire to leave Memphis. So that also says to me, you have a history of doing it. The guy seems very happy where he is. He may be, yeah, I don't need to get every dime as early as humanly possible out of the team. I can make things work a little bit. And they may be able to get a little bit more creative with him with the way they do these extensions.
Yeah, I see both sides of the coin with Jaren's or his current contract, where yes, you said, all right, so there's willingness to be creative. Also, I might think Jaren is well aware that he's been underpaid for,
Yes.
he's going to be way underpaid next year, even if they give him a renegotiation. He was underpaid last year based on the contributions that he gives on the court. Ja Morant is also eligible for an extension. And then, of course, Santi Aldama is headed into restricted free agency. Let's hit those two topics right after this short break. All right, so starting in July, Keith, Ja Morant is also eligible for an extension, and this has gotten a lot less press, it feels like, in the Grizzlies sphere of the internet. This is funny to me. Like, fans, and I'll include myself in this, they recoil at the idea if you mention, like should the Grizzlies consider trading Ja Morant? Like, that gives you hate mail. If you say, okay, so let's sign him to a 2-year, let's tack on 2-year, what I don't know what it is, 2-year 120 to his current deal. They're like, well, all right, well, slow down. Okay, I'm not, like maybe not at 2 years. So what are the circumstances for Ja and the likelihood of you think the Grizzlies maybe offering him this extension in July?
Yeah, I don't think it's overly likely, only because he still has 3 years left on his current extension. Yes, this is the first time he's available to extend since his last extension, which was his rookie scale deal. Or his rookie scale extension, I should say. So it does become a topic, but I think both sides can kind of take it as we don't need to do anything right now. It doesn't really change anything in the moment. And I think if I'm Ja Morant, I would rather play it out a couple years. Let's see if I can get back to establishing myself as an all NBA level player. Then I can remake myself eligible for that supermax extension. And that's where I would go. Because right now would not be eligible for the supermax. It would just be you'd be tacking 2 more years on to the 3 he has existing left. And again, 3 left with this upcoming season. So I think from the Grizzlies side, it is, yeah, we'd like to see you reestablish as an all NBA level guy too. So why do we need to jump in on this? Even if for them it's a little more like it's more protecting the other way. If things slide further, then now we're not locked in because the worst thing that could happen for the Grizzlies is give him the 2 more years now, and then I'm going to even take the off court stuff out of it because I think we're mostly past that. Mm-hmm. But if there's another major injury or there's just kind of always something, right? So something's keeping him from playing at his highest level. Now you're stuck into like, I'm not going to say it'll be quite as bad as like the Bradley Beal contract.
Well, I was thinking
stuck.
John Wall. Like I feel like the John Wall early extension is the exact like, hey, you guys remember that thing that happened in the NBA? Like I think if I'm the Grizzlies, I paint it as we would like to see you reestablish as all NBA. Like that's how you pitch it. Like, oh yeah, no, we want to see you get back to all NBA. But it's like also, we don't want to do 5 years going out. Also, do you think they're going to change the 65 game rule? Because that might be a big issue with reestablish. Even if his on-court play hits that tier, he still has to play 65 games to make all NBA.
We'll see. I kind of don't think so. I don't think we got anything crazy enough that happened this year in terms of being awards eligible, where there was like all this like hue and cry for we got to change it. Yeah. I think we're a little bit closer to, all right, it's, people are going to complain because that's just what they do. But I don't think we're going to see that changed. Maybe when we get into the next CBA discussions, then maybe we see it kind of change there. But I don't think any kind of amendment or renegotiation of that specific point will be made, at least for another couple seasons. They're probably going to give it. Let's give it a little bit more and see what it looks like. Yeah.
What's your impression of Santi Aldama's value this summer as he heads into restricted free agency? Like what value would be for other teams and I wonder if the Edey injury even gives him, seems like that helps him out in negotiations. But what's your thought on his value this summer?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his because I think I think we've seen him do a lot of really good things offensively, and I think there's even more room to grow with that. I think his role on the national team, his shows like he can be like your primary offensive guy if you really want to run things through him. I tend to rate the national team stuff fairly high if a player plays a fairly prominent role because those games are so high intensity. They mean so much that if they hold up, okay, I don't know why, we can't say that might, maybe not in full, but won't translate to the NBA. But I think he also showed this past season real improvements defensively. Like I just thought the easiest way I could put it is just thought he was a lot more competitive defensively against guys. I thought he held up a little bit better on perimeter switches. Thought he gave a little bit more on defense. It felt like in his first couple of years, you put a shoulder into him, you send him sprawling along the baseline and you get a basket. Feels like now was all right. I'm gonna have to really hit him like to move him and he's gonna hit back a little bit. So I think that's really good. So value wise, I think for the Grizzlies, the good news is, are the Nets throwing them a big offer sheet? I'm not going to rule it out because Sean Marks certainly did that before and really kind of tried to wreck things for a couple teams. Maybe he's feeling frisky and wants to do that again this year. And I don't know what the number would need to be kind of average annual value wise. Like I think anything north of 20 million, Memphis has to kind of, all right, is this really where we want to go for a guy who's probably going to be, if we're healthy, our third big in our rotation? Do want to go there. But if it's 15 million in MLE-ish type money, Sure. I have no issue with that at all for Santi Aldama, only because I feel like the offense makes him a known quantity. It's like I can plug this guy in and play him. And with to your point, if Zach Edey's going to be out, if I'm Memphis, he may have even more value to me now as a known quantity, as somebody that, yes, we can put him out there and just know what we're going to get night to night without having to go search for, well, we signed this free agent who we think will be a good fit in what we want to do versus we know this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, I could see him somewhere in that neighborhood of like, I mean, I feel like you'd want a comp of like, look what like a Max Strus got, or look what like, I mean, Patrick Williams is the one that everyone points to is like, that wasn't great. But like, I could imagine 18 to 20 per year, something around there. I think if you could get him for the MLE type number where it's close to 15 million average annual value, that seems great. And I figured that's what he's going to get. I think it remains to be seen what kind of market is out there. Like you said, who's going to sign him? I mean, maybe there'll be some kind of weird, we could get into some funny business sign and trades involving him if someone really likes him.
That could be the other path. Yeah, for sure. And I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, you're good.
That could be a real path of, yeah, hey, because we've heard, right, the Pistons connected. I don't see how the Pistons get there with a straight signing because they've got other things they have to do too. But I could see it be a path where it is, all right, hey, you know what, you still need a big man. How about Isaiah Stewart? Does that work for you? Because we're looking to get a little more balanced in our front court, and Aldama fits us better. And if you're going down that route, and if that worked for the Grizzlies, yeah, you could see a sign and trade there that kind of makes sense. It is funny because we got a question on the podcast I do, front office show, where somebody said, hey, could they trade Santi Aldama and get like Asar Thompson and Ron Holland? And I was like, no, yeah, the Pistons are interested, but not like that interested.
Right.
Like it's there's levels to the amount of interest you have, and if that's where the conversation started, the conversation would also end there also. But yeah, but there are other options, let's just say, that we could get to that makes sense for them as trade partners. And I'm only bringing them up because they've been linked to him very recently.
Yeah, I think Jake Fisher had some stuff about, one thought was most likely to return to Memphis, but also, like you say, the Pistons expressing some interest. Final thing, it seems like when everyone is coming up with their ideas to give Jaren the money that you think could lock him down long term, everyone keeps saying all we got to do is get rid of John Konchar's contract. And it's like, oh yeah, let's just dump John Konchar. I'm just curious your thoughts on what's the feasibility of that? Because I keep thinking, even if a team wants them, they know what you're trying to do. And they're like, listen, we're doing you this huge, we're helping you keep Jaren Jackson Jr. What are you giving me? So what's the feasibility of getting off Konchar's money and bringing back no other salaries?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. It's we know why you want to get off his money, right? Yeah. It's a little bit like, man, you're trying to sell me this car because I know you need to pay your rent. So like, I'm going to drive a hard bargain on you with this. And it gets really tough with that. That said, Sean Marks, I believe, with the Nets is going to kind of redo what he did when he built them up pre-Kyrie KD with them, where it's going to be, hey, I'm going to take shots on some guys. Some will be through absorbing contracts. Some will be through signing guys who washed out other places in the league. And I also think he should open free agency on June 30th at 6 p.m. Eastern, standing in front of the Barclays, holding up the CBA and with a plaque that says, bring me your tired, your hungry, your huddle masses, your bad contracts. Just send him with a draft pick, because I think he's going to be open for business that way. Now, here's the good news for the Grizzlies. Even teams knowing what they're trying to do, we're talking $6 million. We're not talking trying to move off of 20, 30, 40 million bucks. They're not going to have to get into the range of, well, we had to trade a first round pick to dump Konchar. And if they do that, then, I mean, I say this somewhat facetiously, but somewhat not, fire everyone involved. And because that's just roster building malpractice. But if it's like, yeah, we gave up 2 seconds to get off them. Okay. Well, who at some point it's like, really cares? Because kind of running out of roster spots anyway. We don't have a ton of room for these guys. I would just, and I wrote this when I wrote up their offseason preview for Spotrac, I would be looking to get Cam Spencer on a standard contract because I think he's way too good for the G League. So I just bring him over and all right, we're good. Like we gave up a little bit of money and we created a little bit more flexibility to throw Jackson even more money. Now, what gets interesting there, right? We talked about now if you give him that 6 million to the 6 million that you needed to create anyway, now we're already in a spot where all right, now we're getting up 36 million as starting salary, and you might be able to get really fun with the contract where it is like, hey, you want to do 36 million with slight increases, but we don't even do the full 8% increases. We kind of keep it maybe even more flat, going forward, and we might be able to see something like that play out. So yeah, that's a very long answer to a very simple question, but I think they can get off Conchar without getting crazy. And he could be a guy who's interested. Like he could be the next Joe Harris type player for the Nets, where it's like, hey, we picked him up, we gave him 25 minutes a night, and he's shooting 40% from three and playing really well. And but I would hope there's not a big holdup if that needs to be done for Memphis this summer.
Yeah, I hope Sean Marks believes he could become the next Joe Harris reclamation project. I like to say I am a longtime John Conchar fan. I think the ceiling is firmly entrenched. Like John Conchar's a guy. He could fit a lot of places. He could slide in and give you some minutes if needed. I don't think we're ever going to get that shot going. He hasn't even made the percentages that he did early in his career. And those were, I always called them artisanal 3-point selections. A small batch, takes his time, carefully selected. I'm going to take this one. That was one.
To say, guys like him are, they're really good. Like Tuesday night in January in Charlotte guys.
Yes.
Where it's like, hey, I need you for 30 minutes tonight. Great. Let's go. But when it's like, it's a must win game or it's a playoff game, you're not playing. Like,
he did quite literally make contributions in the play-in this year. Yeah. I feel like that's a roster building criticism, but also any other GMs out there watching him, he helped the Grizzlies make the playoffs. Please line up your offers. Anyways, Keith, thanks so much for coming on and spending time with me. Listeners, if you want more from Keith, you can get that with the Front Office Show. You can read his offseason previews he's doing over at Spotrac. If you want more from me, you can get that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. Thanks everybody for listening. Go Grizz.